Welcome back. So we ended last lesson by adding this null reference exception right here, but there's no message yet. So I added the message, and if you guys want to, you can go and create it just like we did with this setup right here. And I actually did that. So I want to just talk about a few things. First of all, if you kind of want to avoid having like two checks every time, one for both the exception and one for the message, I'm going to show you how in this lesson. But you can also kind of start considering, what do I want to make my own exceptions instead of having messages like this? Maybe I actually want to create a location repository cannot be null exception, and I can try and show you that as well. But it's really up to you if you want to use the built-in systems exception handling or you want to build your own exceptions. It's very simple, and I'll try and show you next lesson how you can make your own exception instead if you want to do that. But now I'm just using the built-in exceptions with a message. So let's try and see how we actually made the second exception, and let's jump down here to our test now. And in the test, let's have a look. I'm just zooming out a little bit. So here is the first one where we just tested it was null. We built that the last lesson. And here's the second one where we're going to actually test that it's the right message. Now you already saw this once before when we created the location service, but let's actually try and consider if this is the best way to do it. Now, first of all, we could do something else. We could say, I don't want to waste my time having this extra method. Let's just get rid of that. So I'll just remove it completely. It's okay that I have two asserts in this area, because one assert is actually just for testing the exception right here, and then I have another assert that tests the same exception but the message for the exception. So I would allow that. Let's just say here we get an exception back like this exception, and now I can actually test that exception if I want to. So let's just try and do that. This is one solution right here, and then I'll say this exception is going to be asserted a second time, and if I run this now, I'll test both the message and the actual exception is being thrown. Okay, so I think this is an acceptable way to do it. You don't need to go any further than this if you don't want to. Now, one more thing I want to show you this lesson is you can also start actually writing your code like in a language almost, where you try to explain to whoever uses it that we should do this and then we should do this, and then so you can actually use almost a SQL language to kind of write unit tests instead, that where you can kind of explain, like LINQ, you can explain exactly what you want to do. Let's try and just use that this lesson, and then you can decide yourself if you want to use it. Let's jump into, this is called Fluent Assertion right here. This is their website, and this is kind of the stuff you could write. You could have, like, I expect that when this happens, it should throw this exception with this inner exception with this message, right? So you can start having almost a language, so you can read your exception tracking, and you can of course also do it with other things, like I expect the parameter name should be message, right? So I'm going to try and build that this lesson, and we're going to try and use it later. And again, you can use asserts in their plain sense if you want to, or you can try and build this setup if you want to. But let me try and show you how you can get fluent assertions into your code. So I jump into my project right here, the test project. I add dependency, NuGet packages, and here it is. You can just search for Fluent Assertion 5.10.3. Now, right now in the current version, it doesn't say anything that it's compatible with .NET Core 3.0, but on their web page, it says it is. So I tried it, and it seems to be working. So I'm going to try and use it, and let's see if we hit any points, any issues. But notice right here, it actually says it can be used with .NET Core 3.0 at least. We're using 3.1, so maybe we'll get some issues, but let's try it. So first of all, I imported that package right here, only to my test project, of course. I imported the package, and now I can start using this. So let's try and see what this assert we had before will actually look like in the new setup. So we'll do kind of the same thing right here, but we won't assert. So let's start out by actually using their example. Let's jump back to the example just to kind of have something to work from. It says instead that we can actually get an action right here from whatever we're doing. So let's try and do that. We're going to use a small trick in C# so we can get an action. You can write it like this. Let's just call it action. And then you can actually make, like you see right here, you can use equal and then feather notation right here to fake a method like this. And then what do I want to fake? Well, I want to fake my location service. Whoops. Location service. There we go. Dot create. Right? And then I want to, of course, create it with null right here. And I don't need to add the as anymore, because it knows now it's a location, because when I was doing test driven, it didn't know it, but now I created the service and now it knows it. But you can still put in as location if you want to kind of explain to anybody that this is a location. Now with the action available, I can now do the second thing, which is kind of starting using this should, right? So now I can say I expect this action should. So now I'm using the language, right? It should, and then it should throw the exception of null reference. That's the exception I expect it should throw. And then I can say in the end with message, and then I can put in the message, right? So notice it's, I don't know if it's easier to read, but I think it's more like a human language we're using right here. So we are saying the action should throw this exception with this message compared to this where it's using the same, it's the same thing, it's doing the same thing, but it's using the assert instead. So let's try this out. I'll just remove this. Actually, let me just outcome this, then you guys can decide which one you want to use in the next lesson. There we go. I'll save this and let's try and run the same code right here and see if we're actually still happy and everything's green. Again, remember to run your unit tests every time. By the way, if you guys want to run all tests like I just did, you can go up here and you can right click the method itself to run all tests like this, or you can go even further and you can actually go all the way out to the project and say run unit test, and it'll run all tests in the actual project, just so that you know. So that's it for this lesson. Now I kind of just gave you guys an idea about using this another setup called Fluent Assertion if you want to kind of write with a human language, write your tests like this. And I'll play around with that for a while because I feel it's always fun to challenge new frameworks. So that's it for this lesson. Next lesson, let's just have a look at how you can create your own exception if you want to. Have fun.